Om Jnanatimarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksurunmilitan Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimati BhaktiVedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Kauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur BhaktiVedanta. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we welcome everyone back to our study of this chapter number 20, Description of Autumn, from the 10th Canto Srimad Bhagavatam, which we're studying as part of the BhaktiVedanta course. So yesterday I wanted to show you the illustration which is presented for this one text which we studied yesterday. We were talking about how sometimes the sage may speak and sometimes they don't. Written here, number 33. This is 33 in the light of the Bhagavad, but in the Srimad Bhagavatam it's text number, I think, 37. There are waterfalls, the wording is also different anyway, but it's the same kind of text, just different wording. There are waterfalls flowing from the hills of the forest, but sometimes water does not flow from them. So the waterfalls are not like ordinary rainfall. They are compared to great reformers who speak or do not speak as the time requires. So we were speaking how, we were discussing yesterday, it was very nice, how sometimes a person may speak and sometimes he will be quiet. And the example is given here in nature that in the autumn season, sometimes the water will be there from the waterfalls and sometimes it's not. So the same way sometimes these great sages, they may speak, they're fully realized, they're fully enlightened, but they will consider the circumstances and they will consider, what do you think, particularly before they speak, they're going to consider what? What do you think is going to influence the great sage in making a decision whether or not to speak? Also, the question comes up, what he's going to speak about? Is he just going to speak about the science of the soul, or is he going to speak about prema bhakti? What's going to be the main consideration there?
The specific circumstance.
Yes, what circumstances? What's going to make...
If the circumstance is congenial, if people are eager to hear, and then he would reveal it.
Anybody else like to add something there? Eagerness to hear. Yeah, audience should be enthusiastic. That's important. Certainly that eagerness to hear, mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam in the first canto, first chapter. The sages from Naimisharanya were eager to hear Sutta Goswami.
Maharaj, may I speak?
Yes.
Maharaj, we see in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna did not speak until Arjuna expressed his submission. So the student should be submissive for a great soul, a spiritual master to speak.
Well, I would say that's a special circumstance, you know. It's not necessarily true that the one has to be fully submissive or surrendered. We don't, for example, when we look at Maharaj Rahugan and Jadbharat. Rahugan was not really submissive to Jadbharat, but Jadbharat spoke. You know, Maharaj Rahugan was actually chastising Jadbharat. He said, "Have you beaten?" Yeah, so seems to be some special situations. Sometimes it may be like that. They should be submissive, certainly. Arjuna had requested Krishna to become his guru and to guide him. He wanted instruction from him. So he should show submissiveness, but that submissiveness may not always be there. Yes?
Maybe if it is beneficial for the people to hear, then the sadhu speak.
Yes, should be beneficial for them. I think also you have to consider their qualification to hear. And you know, what exactly are you going to explain to them based on their qualification? You know, neophyte people or common people, we're not going to speak to them about bhava and prema bhakti. We have to speak on a more general platform. Knowledge of the difference between the body and the soul will be much more appropriate for the common people.
Maharaj, it may be that the messenger himself is under orders from a superior, let's say for example either God or his representatives, to spread the message of God. So that might be another inspiration for him to try to spread the message according to the audience, of course.
Yes, in some circumstances the order is definitely there, but at the same time we have to be somewhat selective. And we see for example in Narada Muni going to people, what was it, Chitraketu initially wanted a son, and so Narada and Angira came and they gave him some sweet rice and said, "You give this to your queen, you get a son." They didn't preach to him. They waited until the son had died, and then they came to preach. They waited for the appropriate situation where the king was more receptive to hearing them. We see, however, Narada Muni is preaching to the hunter, Mrigari the hunter. Narada Muni saw the hunter doing so many atrocities, trapping the animals and half killing them in a very cruel manner. And Narada Muni enlightened him about spiritual knowledge and convinced him to take to the path of devotion. So that was special. And we had also the example, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. That Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sat for 7 days and listened without questioning. And it was only when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya began to get agitated and frustrated that there's no questions, why don't you ask something, you don't understand, then only Lord Chaitanya spoke. So he waited for the appropriate situation when he could deliver transcendental knowledge. So there has to be that mood anyway, that the mercy, to give mercy to others. But it's going to depend on the speaker also. The speaker has to feel the inspiration to actually preach to that particular person. Prahlad Maharaj preached to the sons of all the demons in the Gurukula. He considered, these children in the Gurukula, that they were good candidates for devotional service. They were wasting their time in so many foolish ways, and he preached to them about devotional service. And so it's not so clear what particular situation we should preach, when we should preach and when we shouldn't. It really depends a lot on the Lord in the heart, the inspiration we get from the heart, Krishna guiding us and empowering us and giving us that particular inspiration to really make efforts to deliver. Sometimes we do preach. I saw Prabhupada preach to one young man, and the man was not accepting anything. And Prabhupada kept preaching and preaching. And why was Prabhupada preaching? Because he was teaching the devotees. That we were all sitting listening to Prabhupada, and we were hearing Prabhupada give so many examples. The young man wasn't really submissive, and he wasn't accepting. But Prabhupada kept preaching. Why? Because he was teaching us. He was showing us, letting us hear how to present the philosophy and what examples we could use in preaching. And interesting enough, later on, Prabhupada came back. He'd gone out for a walk. He came back, and he found the man was in the temple room, and he was in the temple room dancing. And Prabhupada said, "You see," he said, "I talked to him for so long, didn't make any impression, but now he's in the kirtan, chanting and dancing." He said, "This is Lord Chaitanya's mercy. This is the power of Sankirtan, that it gets everyone up to the transcendental level." Okay. Okay, we're going to go on. Here's the text which we're going to go on today. Here's the illustration from text number, I think it's 37. Oh no, this is the wrong one. I've got the wrong one. It should be the other one. Still got the same one. Krishna. Hare Krishna. Goes back and forward. Should be this one then. Having some difficulty here to get this picture. Okay, I don't know what's happening, it's not opening. Doesn't matter, we won't show the picture, we'll just go to the text. Okay, can everyone see the text for the Srimad Bhagavatam?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay, good. So we're on text number 37. The fish swimming in the increasingly shallow water did not at all understand that the water was diminishing, just as foolish family men cannot see how the time they have left to live is diminishing with every passing day. So we're hearing about the autumn season. You will remember some of the descriptions of autumn. How cloudless sky, and the sun is very warm. What about the wind? Is there any wind in autumn? The main thing, the wind is not harsh. In the rainy season it can be very strong and harsh, but in the autumn season the wind is not harsh. So cloudless sky, clear water. Remember, the water's clear and lotus flowers are growing there, and the water's settled down because no rain. So this is pretty much the description of autumn. So after the rainy season, the water gradually goes down, but stupid fish, not understanding this, thus they are often stranded on the lake shores and river banks. Similarly, those infatuated with family life. And so, Sukadeva Goswami is telling us about, he's giving this example. The fish are in the water, but the water's becoming shallower and shallower, and they're going to get stuck. They're going to find themselves with no water at all. But then when that happens, they'll die. And somebody will come along and take them maybe, and they'll eat them or something. Maybe the cat will come or something, and cats eat fish. So it's a very precarious situation. And similarly, family life can also be a very precarious situation. We don't see the problems and the difficulty. We're not preparing for the future. Everyone has to be properly trained. We said, and the life begins with the brahmacharya life, and then we enter into grihastha life, understanding that grihastha life is a part of the life. It's not the complete. It's not that we have to remain in grihastha life till the end of life, but we go on into vanaprastha. And that helps us to prepare for the next life. So grihastha life can be a preparation for that, for going into vanaprastha life. Sometimes we see if the young man hasn't had experience of family life, then he becomes, he's not able to properly absorb himself in the spiritual practice because his mind is so drawn to family life. It's like a part of life. It's a part of the culture. Most people in the world are family people. They're married people. The vast majority of people are in family life. And if somebody doesn't have a wife, they don't have children, then they feel, they can feel uncomfortable, they can feel lonely. And we see people often go into family life. Recently, even we had one devotee, he was in old age and he went into family life. He was already almost like 70 years of age and he decided to get married. And he had been a very active preacher for many years, but somehow he wasn't settled and he gave it up and he went back. Sometimes we have to go back in order to go forward. It's unfortunate, but sometimes these things happen. So we have to be careful. That's the point. Don't try to rush into transcendence, right? Premature transcendence. Everyone agree? Now people in family life, they may complain, oh, it's so difficult, oh, it's so trouble. But it's trouble everywhere in the material world. Everywhere is trouble. Okay, number 38 is similar. It's also talking about fish and their plight in shallow water. Anyway, we'll read it. Just as a miserly, poverty-stricken person, overly absorbed in family life, suffers because he cannot control his senses, the fish swimming in the shallow water had to suffer the heat of the autumn sun. So again, the example is fish, and the water is getting shallow, and they're suffering. Very difficult. And this is similar to people absorbed in family life, particularly because they cannot control their senses. And so because they don't control their senses, they may have several children. And the bigger, they have big family, and sometimes it can be difficult to support the family. It's a lot of work to maintain a large family. Although it's very nice, it's very good to have a large family and bring them all up in Krishna consciousness, but it's not such an easy thing unless one is well situated. If he's, has a good job and he has good income, then it's not so bad. But otherwise it can be very difficult. And nowadays we don't find it so common. People in general, difficult for them to have so many children. But it's actually very nice. There was that one lady, Krishna Nandini Mataji, she had 9 children, was it? 9 or 10 children. And she was a very good devotee. And she wrote books about how to take care of children, how to bring up children, which was very nice and very helpful for devotees. So in the purport, they talk about ignorance is bliss, that the fish are in ignorance. And they're thinking, it's okay, everything's all right. But they don't see the danger. They're not aware of the difficulties which are coming. Similarly, an attached family man may consider his ignorance of spiritual life to be blissful. But still there's a lot of disturbance, uncontrolled senses, and so many anxieties. One of the difficulties is keeping people happy. And when you have a family, it's difficult to keep everyone happy. Although the man may be working very hard and trying his best to please everyone, it's very difficult to satisfy everyone. And so we say you should be satisfied. This applies to everyone in the family, not just to the father. Everyone should be satisfied. The wife should be satisfied. She shouldn't always be complaining to the husband. And the children should be satisfied also. They shouldn't always be complaining to their parents. Oh, I need this, I have to get that, you should get me this. Children can put a lot of pressure onto their parents, make life very difficult. So it's very difficult to satisfy people. This is a problem. Actually, what we should be doing is satisfy Krishna. Very hard to satisfy everyone, but if you can satisfy Krishna, that's the best thing. Try to please Krishna and the spiritual master also. Everyone agree? Any comments? Okay, we'll go ahead. Number 39 in the chapter 20, Bhagavatam. Gradually, the different areas of land give up their muddy condition, and the plants grew past their unripe stage. In the same way that sober sages give up egotism and possessiveness. These are based on things different from the real self, namely the material body and its byproducts. So, the example is given here. Nice example. We know in autumn season, there's no rain, so the muddy condition is gradually reducing, and the ground is becoming harder and solid, not so muddy anymore. And the plants are growing up, and they've come to they're becoming ready for harvesting. And this is compared to the sober sages who give up these two qualities, egotism and possessiveness. So possessiveness, that will be an outward attribute. Possessiveness, just like we have the man may have a son, or the wife has a son. His wife they have a son. So they're very proud. This is our son. This is our son. Very attached. They identify our son, our house, like this, the home also. So this is possessiveness is based on the outward objects. Egotism is more internal. The mood of egotism, the sense of I am the doer, I did this. You know, that kind of mood which is there within people. So one is outward and the other is inward. But the sober sage will give up both of these kind of qualities because he's understood that he's not the material body and he has nothing to do with the byproducts of the body. The byproducts of the body are mentioned, the children, the home, the wealth. And this is all the byproducts. So he's detached from all that. He's reached that stage of maturity in his path of transcendence. He's able to give up that identification with the body and the attachment to the material objects. And it's compared to nature, to just like the land drying up and the plants growing. Well, go ahead. Text number 40. With the arrival of autumn, the ocean and the lakes become silent, their waters still, just like a sage who has desisted from all material activities and given up his recitation of Vedic mantras. With the arrival of autumn. And so again, the end of the rainy season, we're into autumn and it's warm, the cloudless sky, everything is peaceful, and the ocean and the lakes also are silent. Their water still. All right? The water is actually pure, not like in the rainy season where all the mud comes up from the bottom, but the water is pure and peaceful, and it's compared to the sage who has stopped all his material activities, and he gives up his recitation of Vedic mantras. Why would he give up reciting Vedic mantras, do you think?
From purification?
Well, doesn't he get purification by reciting Vedic mantras? You know, Vedic mantras, the Vedas are, you know, it's coming from the Lord himself, right? The Vedas, Tenhe Brahma Hridaya Shahadikavaye. The Vedic knowledge was imparted into the heart, and the heart of Brahma. And so the Vedas are some way, and you know, the Vedic mantras, you could say, you know, it's certainly auspicious sounds.
Maharaj, can I speak?
Yes, please do.
Maharaj, in case of if they are jnanis, then jnana they have to give up at a particular point of time.
What?
They have to give up the jnana at a particular point of time before entering Brahman.
Ah.
In that case, they have to give up the Vedic mantras. Krishna writes it as a Jnanam Chamai Sannaset in 11th Canto, 11.19.1.
Oh.
So in that case, they have to give up the Vedic mantras before entering in Brahman.
Give up the Vedic mantras before entering into Brahman. And so what's he going to do when he enters into Brahman?
Brahman is inert. It doesn't have any activity there.
Oh, no activity. Is that secure?
Not secure.
No.
Yes, Mary.
They have to fall down again.
Yeah. Yes, Maharaji?
Here, I think in the purport it mentions the ordinary Vedic mantras which actually promotes dharma, artha, kama. And Krishna also, I mean, here the sage has using those Vedic mantras for fulfilling the personal desires. And Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita that one should not get attracted to this flowery languages of the Vedas which gives all these three. One should transcend these things. So in that sense, he started vibrating he started reciting the transcendental glories which is, Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita that what Arjuna should transcend. In that sense, he gives up reciting the Vedic mantras, which is ordinary.
And what will he recite?
He'll start reciting those which actually, I mean, the Vedic mantras are like bringing the people from three modes, right? One can use, removing the thorn with the same thorn.
Remove the
So
thorn.
to come out of the three modes, we use the transcendental, we should take up some other process which is beyond the three modes. In that sense, started reciting the transcendental glories.
So, what would you recite?
We take shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam, Maharaj.
Yes.
Glory to the Lord.
Huh? Yes, Srimad Bhagavatam, right. That's a ripened fruit of the Vedas. Yes, very, very good. Yes.
Maria.
Huh? Yes, Prabhu?
Yes, ma'am.
So it mentions here Vedic mantras for promotion, right? So material promotion, some people may recite Vedic mantras for material promotion. That's going to be like the karma yogi. You know, he wants to maybe go to heaven and enjoy there. And then you've got the yogi who wants the mystic powers. He may also go to the higher planets to enjoy mystic powers and yoga siddhis. And then the impersonalist, the jnani, he will want to enter into the impersonal Brahman. So they could all be reciting Vedic mantras. One recites ordinary Vedic mantras for these things. They would all be reciting the Vedic mantras. But when he gets free of personal desire, like these people, the karma yogi, the jnana yogi, and the mystic yogi, they all have material desires. Bhukti mukti siddhikami sakali ashanta. So they're not completely free of personal desires. But when they get free of personal desire, then they'll come to the higher stage and they'll just simply chant the glories of the Supreme Lord exclusively. As Maharaji nicely described there, these other things, this is the flowery regions of the Vedas. So Krishna gives the example about the flowers, because flowers are very temporary. They look good for a little while, but they don't last long. They soon wither and dry up. And so that's the problem with the material benedictions which you're getting. It won't last for very long. But if you go to the transcendental platform, if you come to the transcendental stage, then you can get eternal life. You can go to the spiritual world. So the sage can give up chanting Vedic mantras. It's just simply for materialistic-minded people. Okay, going ahead, 41. In the same way that the practitioners of yoga bring their senses under strict control to check their consciousness from flowing out through the agitated senses, the farmers erected strong mud banks to keep the water within their rice fields from draining out. All right, so this is an interesting analogy here. The farmers in the fields, of course, they build these walls of mud to keep the water within, because they know in autumn there's not going to be much rain. The rainy season's over, and we see in India generally that a lot of the places, they can only get one harvest. They can only plant rice once in the year. They plant once in the year, and that's, at the time when it rains. The rest of the time there'll be no rain, so how can they grow anything? No water. But what they can do is when it rains, they can keep the water within the fields. And so they have mud banks to keep the water within the rice fields and stop it from draining out. So this is compared to the practitioners of yoga. How are the yogis going to do this? What are they going to do to cultivate to keep their power? Right? Any of you know?
According to purport, they control the senses so that unnecessary energy is not drained out in using senses for sense gratification.
So there's a process to do that in yoga. Do you know the process?
Using it for a higher purpose, getting higher taste.
Well, no, there's a mechanical process by which one can keep this power and restrain it. Stop it from running out, going out. As you said, of course, you have to go away from sense gratification. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to give up sense gratification? You still have material desires.
Control the breath, Maharaj?
Huh?
Control the breath?
Yes.
Because the life air is...
That's a possibility, right? That's one way. That's one mechanical process. Control the breath, right?
Maharaj, there are different chakras in the body, so the energy is preserved in those chakras.
Okay. Okay. So, first of all, Prabhu's talking about controlling the breath. So that's part of what process in yoga? What kind of yoga?
Pranayama.
Pranayama. Yeah, but pranayama is one step in what kind of yoga?
Hatha yoga.
No, Astanga.
Yeah, Ashtanga, Hatha, yes.
Ashtanga yoga.
Astanga yoga, right. Yam, niyam, asan, pranayam. Right? Yam, niyam, asan, pranayam. It's the fourth step in yoga, in breath control. You know, sometimes, if you have difficulty controlling anger, it's sometimes a good idea to practice that kind of thing, breath control, before you get too angry and start yelling and screaming and throwing things and saying bad things. Better to just sometimes do some pranayama. Go away and just go and do some pranayama, control your breath, get yourself under control. So breath control is a mechanical process by which we can control the mind. Anger management is often a big challenge for people. Helping people to overcome their anger. Sometimes it's very dangerous. People get so angry sometimes they do things which they regret. So it's important to be able to control your anger, and one way in which you can do it is by breath control. People need to practice, in previous ages everyone knew how to do that, pranayama. It was common practice. Everyone was doing it. Kali Yuga people, not so many people know. Of course, that one man, I won't say his name, but he's got a very big movement. They teach that pranayama everywhere, and they get a lot of people to their Mayavadi, impersonal things. They attract their people by pranayama, by teaching pranayama. Which is, Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavatam, how pranayama can prolong life. It can help people to live longer time, but of course that's not the goal. Why should we want to have a long life? The trees also live a long time. What's the point of a long life? Better a moment of full consciousness than a long life like a tree. And Prabhupada, which examples does Prabhupada give? Who was in this world only a short time but made great contributions?
Chaitanya.
Yes. How many years was he here?
40.
48.
40.
And who else? You don't know this purport? It's a famous purport. Prabhupada said, better a moment of full consciousness than a lifetime like a tree. And he says, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in this world for 48 years. And then Shankaracharya. How many years was Shankaracharya in the world?
30.
32.
32, right. 32 years. But great contribution. Prabhupada appreciates the contribution. Shankaracharya, yeah, great contribution, right. What did he do? What did Shankaracharya do?
He reinstated Vedas, Maharaj.
Yes, he brought back the Vedas.
Drove away Buddhism
Huh?
to a large extent.
What?
Drove away Buddhism.
Drove
from
out
India.
Buddhism, right. Generally, he's got the credit for doing that, for defeating Buddhism, driving Buddhism out of India. Yes. And literary contribution also. He wrote his Jagannathastikam was there. Shankaracharya wrote a Jagannathastikam. Interesting enough. And so many commentaries, different scriptures, BhaktiVedanta and like that. Okay, so great contribution, short life, but great contribution. So it's not just a long life. We don't want that. The aim is to do something. So pranayama does help us to, you can, and helps get better health, helps you have some maybe health problems. It can help to give you better health and a longer life. But there's another process also which comes on a higher level of pranayama. After pranayama, that is pratyahara. Right? Yam, niyam, asan, pranayam, pratyahara. Dharana, dhyana and samadhi, right? Astanga yoga, these are the 8 stages. So pratyahara is particularly mentioned by Prabhupada in his Light of the Bhagavat purport, and he talks about the process of pratyahara for restraining the senses. That the yogi can restrain his senses by doing practicing the process of pratyahara. Right? That pratyahara means instead of being absorbed in the external, you turn the consciousness within, withdrawing the senses. Instead of looking around you, you look within and contemplate within. That is pratyahara, restraining the senses. So this is one way in which the yogi can bring the senses under control and check the consciousness from flowing out through agitated senses. Just think how much we waste our energy in so many futile endeavors. We want to learn how to conserve. We talk about conserving energy, don't waste resources. So we ourselves, within our own human life, we're often very negligent and we waste a lot of the power of life which is in our body. So contemplating the object, just contemplating sense gratification takes away a lot of energy from the body. We want to practice this breath control maybe in pratyahara, these things. Unless, of course, we may be very good in bhakti yoga, we can simply absorb ourselves in chanting the holy name. But not everybody's on that level, that they're able to just simply take shelter of the holy name. So we should understand there are some processes there which help us to come to the higher level. And these things are also Vedic, they're mentioned in the scriptures. BhaktiVedanta describes about the process of yoga and meditation. So this is compared to the farmer building the wall around the fields to keep the water from draining out. We don't want to let our energy drain out. We waste our energy in so many mundane, futile endeavors. If you look at what people do, how they waste their human life. So Prabhupada says, in the purport it says, unless one is able to control the senses and engage them in the transcendental loving service of Mukunda, there is no possibility of salvation. All right, we'll go ahead. 42. The autumn moon relieved all creatures of the suffering caused by the sun's rays, just as wisdom relieves a person of the misery caused by his identifying with his material body, and as Lord Mukunda relieves Vrindavan's ladies of the distress caused by their separation from him. So there's no purport here in the text, but in the light of the Bhagavat, Srila Prabhupada has given some purport on this text. And particularly he talks about the two different ways in which people can worship Lord Mukunda, as he is described here. That we can worship Lord Krishna either in Sambhoga or in Viraha. Meaning, Sambhoga means directly, in direct connection with Krishna, meeting with Krishna, and directly worshipping him. Or in Viraha, that is the process of separation. And of course, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the followers of Lord Chaitanya, they recommend the process of worshipping Lord Krishna in that mood of viraha, in that mood of separation. Because feeling the separation of Lord Krishna, then one becomes more absorbed in Krishna. If we are directly serving Krishna, we won't be so absorbed. But when we feel the separation from Krishna, there will be more consciousness of Krishna. So this is, of course, the mood of the gopis. The mood of the gopis. All the gopis who are considered the greatest of all Krishna's devotees. They're simple cowherd ladies. But what is their position? They're the greatest devotees. And who are these ladies, actually? In their previous life, there are different identities. In their previous life, you have some of the gopis were the great sages from Dandakaranya forest who had seen Lord Rama and they wanted to have an amorous relationship with him. But Lord Rama told them that, I'm sorry that I vowed only to have one wife in this Leela, but you come in my next incarnation and you can take birth in the families of the gopis of Braja, and at that time we can arrange to satisfy all your desires. So the sages from Dandakaranya, they became a group of gopis. And then there's other sages, the personified Vedas. They also became a group of gopis. The Shruti Charanas, the personified Vedas, they wanted to understand more of the Lord's pastimes, and in order for them to do that, they had to take birth in the family of the cowherd ladies of Vrindavan. Just simply as the Shruti Charanas, they could not understand Krishna's pastimes. It wasn't until they took their birth in the families of the Vrijbasi people and take care of the cows, then they were actually able to join with Lord Krishna and take part in his pastimes. So those are two groups of gopis. Just to show you, these gopis, they're not ordinary ladies. Just like the cowherd boys are all great souls who perform pious activities over many lifetimes. In the same way, the gopis also were very, very special enlightened ladies. Not that they were just simple village ladies, illiterate, didn't know anything, just collect cow dung. No, they were very, very enlightened devotees of Lord Krishna. So they were feeling separation from Krishna. They're given as the example. Well, first of all, we're told about the moon relieving all creatures of their suffering caused by the sun's rays. In the daytime, in the autumn, the sun's rays are very hot. But then in the evening, when the moon comes up, then the moon is cooling and people feel relief. And then, so it's compared to just as wisdom relieves a person of the misery caused by his identifying with the material body. Wisdom helps us to get free of the misery caused by identifying with this material body. We should remember that. We often feel miserable simply because of our material bodies. But if we will take advantage of transcendental knowledge, the wisdom, that will relieve us from all the anxieties and the depression and the bodily problems which are coming on us. So the material body, the cause of all of our problems. But we can get relief from that by knowledge, by wisdom. And then the other example is about the gopis. Lord Mukunda relieves Vrindavan's ladies of the distress caused by their separation from him. So the gopis, they worship Krishna so much, but in their separation from him, they felt great anguish, they felt great anxiety. It was very difficult for them to be separate from Lord Krishna. They were always in that fire of separation. So the fire of separation was put out by when Lord Krishna would return. Krishna would go out every day into the forest with the cows, and then the gopis would feel the separation, because the gopis can't go into the forest with Krishna in the daytime. The cowherd boys go, the gopas, and the gopis, they get Krishna in the night. But in the daytime, it's the cowherd boys who are with Krishna. And the gopis, they have to do their chores. They have to take care of the cows. They have to take care of the children. They have to clean the house. They have to do so many things. They have to churn the butter, milk the cows, all these things. And the cowherd boys, they're there with Krishna in the forest, playing with him. Okay, so that's 42. We'll go ahead, 43. Free of clouds and filled with clearly visible stars, the autumn sky shone brilliantly, just like the spiritual consciousness of one who has directly experienced the purport of the Vedic scriptures. The purport of the Vedic scriptures, what would that be? What is the purport of the Vedic scriptures?
Maharaj, can it be our Sambandha Gyan with Krishna?
Yes, I think so, Prabhu. I would think that's part of it, yes. Anybody else? What would be a verse from the Bhagavad Gita? Yes. Yeah.
It's Krishna.
Yes. Krishna says, I think that's what I was thinking of. Yeah, I think Krishna, I'm in the hearts of all living entities. From me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. But then he said, by all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the author and I am the compiler of the Vedas. And so Lord Krishna is telling us that actually the whole purpose of the Vedas is to know Krishna. By all the Vedas I am to be known. So the purport of the Vedic scriptures is to know Krishna. We want to know Krishna. What should we know? Well, we should janma karma chame divyam eva myo vedita. Right? We should know Krishna's janma and karma. We should know about Krishna's birth and activities. And we should understand how they're divyam, transcendental. So, like this, it's compared to the clouds, which, the sky is free of clouds, and filled with clearly visible stars. So this is the nature of autumn. In the night, you don't have to worry about the clouds blocking the moonlight and the stars, because the clouds are all clear, they're gone away. There's no clouds in the autumn season. You've got the clear sky. And the clear sky is like the Shabda Brahman, or it's like the mode of goodness, the pure mode of goodness, the clear sky with clearly visible stars. And the stars are like the different yoga processes. So the autumn sky shone brilliantly, just like the spiritual consciousness of one who has directly experienced the purport of the Vedic scriptures. So we want direct experience of the purport of the Vedic. Direct experience means that we actually feel, we can understand the power of Krishna consciousness. We will feel transcendentally enlivened. Prabhupada had one servant. It happened at the time of the moon landing, when the Americans were supposed to be landing on the moon. So Prabhupada had this one young man, an American man, and the American man was very infatuated with the moon landing. He was saying to Prabhupada, "Isn't it wonderful, Prabhupada? We're landing on the moon." And Prabhupada would just say, "That's not the moon. He said, "This is not the moon. Don't be fooled." He said, "This cannot be the moon. The moon is a higher planet. This is just a desert. The moon is not like that." So Prabhupada was telling him, and the man was very disturbed. He became very depressed, and he became very morose even. And Prabhupada could see how the man was affected. And then Prabhupada said to the young man, he said, "You cannot be in Krishna consciousness if you are morose." Right? We know Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma. So one who has actually understood that he's Brahman, he will be prasanatma, he will be a joyful soul. So there should be that realization, direct experience of the purport of the Vedic scriptures. Knowing Krishna, we should feel ourselves to be very fortunate. We should feel very grateful for this opportunity to have a connection to Krishna. So that appreciation should be there. If we're not appreciating that, if we're not appreciating Krishna, it would be very difficult to continue our practice in spiritual life. We have to be getting some taste. And that taste, that is the experience of the purports of the Vedic scriptures. We have to get that taste. There has to be the proper feeling, the proper mood of Krishna consciousness. And this is mentioned in the purport. The spiritual nature is always brilliant, clean, and blissful. And this spiritual nature, called Vaikuntha, immediately satisfies all the desires of the soul. This is the secret of Krishna consciousness. Right? What's the secret of Krishna consciousness?
Satisfying the spiritual master. Soul, satisfy the soul.
Yeah.
So success is in satisfying the spiritual master.
Okay. Yes. You have to get the help of the spiritual master who will guide you how to satisfy the soul, how to awaken the soul, the desire of the soul, satisfy all the desires of the soul. Okay. What is the desire? What are the desires of the soul? What does the soul actually desire?
Krishna consciousness.
Yes.
The love of Krishna.
Yes, we want love of Krishna, Krishna consciousness. Yes, we want
unlimited happiness.
Yeah, we want yeah, we like that, unlimited happiness.
Engage in his constitution position.
Yes, we want it to be connected to Krishna.
It's the secret of Krishna consciousness. Satisfying spiritual master.
So they talk about, this is the spiritual nature called Vaikuntha, meaning no anxiety. If we're in anxiety, then that's not right. We should be free of anxiety. Of course, it's easy to get anxiety. It's not so easy to just transcend all these anxieties of the material world. I'm sure when you're running a center and you look after devotees, different problems, devotees come up from day to day. And so there's always, you get anxieties. It's so difficult sometimes. And of course when you have a family, the same things are there too. There will be anxieties, different problems come. Maybe even health problems, whatever, problems with our own bodies, causing us anxiety. And sometimes it's difficult to transcend all of these things. And we have to, therefore, constantly check ourselves, when we have to go back to the basics, the sadhana, again, hearing and chanting. We have to have that very regular spiritual practice. Every day you want to have that program, where you're doing a good sadhana, regular practice of hearing and chanting. And that will keep us away from all the anxiety, all the problems which come up in the course of everyday life. Otherwise, it can be very difficult. Right? You agree? Even though we may be living in the temple, we may be full-time brahmachari like that, but still you can have anxieties, right, Srinivas? Isn't it true?
Yes, Maharaj. Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah, we get anxieties. To stay free of all these things, it's not so easy. We have to...
More than the householders.
Everyone has their share according to their karma. It's not always like that, but sometimes it is. It's going to depend on every individual. Will be different for individuals. But we have to relieve ourselves. We have to get relief from the anxiety by taking shelter of the holy name and by doing proper study of the scriptures and the association of devotees and regular kirtan. Like that will help us to tolerate these things, right?
Yes.
The examples are given just like rivers flow into the sea, but the ocean remains still, remains undisturbed. So in the same way, the transcendentalist, his mind, even though so many thoughts, so many desires are there, can remain always controlled and peaceful. We have to apply the knowledge of Krishna consciousness. We cannot just be mechanical about these things. We want to experience this spiritual nature. It sounds attractive. So we can see the comparison. The autumn is clear and the stars are visible in the sky. So it's like the pure heart of the devotee. We saw Srila Prabhupada, and in the end of his life, his godbrothers came to visit him in Vrindavan. The godbrothers came to see him, and Prabhupada asked them all, he said, if I've committed offences against you, please forgive me. And Prabhupada could understand his health was not very good and he wouldn't remain in the world much longer. So he asked the devotees he said, I preached very strongly. He said, sometimes I was very outspoken. So he said, if I've offended you, please forgive me. And his godbrothers were very nice about it. And they said, no, you've done very well. You did wonderful preaching. You didn't offend us. We appreciate everything you've done. You did so much. to push on Krishna consciousness. Anyway, that example was there that before he left the world, Prabhupada wanted to be relieved of any kind of grudge or bad feelings which might have been there. And that was also shown, I remember when His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami left the world. When Bhakti Tirtha Swami, he was suffering from cancer for some time. So he had cancer, but he took the opportunity, and he was telling devotees also, he said, when it comes time to leave the body, he said, you want to make sure that you get rid of any bad feelings or any grudges, anything you might have towards others. You don't want to take these kind of things with you to the next life. Sometimes people, they have a habit, we carry these things in our mind. We carry these different impressions with us, oh, that person, I hate that person, and I remember they did this to me, and we have these feelings, and we can carry them with us for a long time. And so it's very harmful for us, for our spiritual progress. It's really important that we're able to let go of all of these things. We have to clean the consciousness. We have to clean, as we say, clean the heart. Of course, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also spoke about this when he said, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. And we have the example how Lord Chaitanya cleaned the Gundicha temple. And the Gundicha is the heart. And though we read about these things, we don't often understand that we're meant to do it ourselves to our own heart. We're meant to clean out our own heart and to get rid of all the bitterness and the grudges and the faults and offenses which we've done. And so many different things are there, different anarthas, kuti nati, like fault finding and ahimsa, being violent to others and so on. So we want to be very conscious of these things. And that consciousness should be there throughout our life. You don't just want to wait till the end of life, because we don't know when the life is going to end. We don't know how long we have left in this world. Just as Sukadeva, Maharaj Parikshit was asking Sukadeva Goswami, what is the duty of one who is about to die, and what is the duty of all men at all time? Because everyone's in this position. We don't know. We're very insecure. At any time we may have to leave this world, and we should be ready. And so it's important for us to try to keep the heart as clean as possible, and don't get emotional, and don't get bad feelings and hold on to a lot of bitterness and grudges and so on in our heart. Get them out, let them out, and beg forgiveness from the people, and try to keep a good relationship. And it's very important. And Prabhupada showed that, the final pastime, as I said, when Prabhupada came, they all came, Prabhupada begged them. And they did, they said yes, and no problem, if we don't have any grudge against you, we don't feel you've offended us, we are appreciating you. So it was very nice. So this is important, though, to clean the heart. And this is how the heart of the devotee should be pure heart. We should be pure-hearted. Yeah? Any comments? Okay, maybe we'll take a break now. All right? We'll take a break for 10 minutes and we'll be back. Thank you. Hare Krishna.